Hey, Barflies, quick question. Is staffing and retention a challenge for you? Yeah, I thought so. Tonight's episode is a live recording from May 4th with the Tara Chadwick from episode 9. We'll be discussing employee engagement and satisfaction. You won't want to miss it. This is RT Sidebar. Stay tuned.
All right, Barflies, we are excited to get this started off, but we have an important announcement. Today's episode is going to be dedicated to two very, very special people. The first one is our good friend, my wife, myself, with respiratory therapist for a long time, one of the kindest people that I've ever known. Mrs. Tiffany Brightbill passed away recently. Awesome respiratory therapist. She was surrounded by loved ones. And I will miss you very, very much. So Tiff, rest in peace. We really appreciate you. Jonathan?
Yeah, we have another tough loss from our friends and family. Baby Leo in Cincinnati, unfortunately, has passed away. It was a tough loss. I watched a little bit of his story, and his mom, Trach Mama, she did a lot for him. It's just really tough. It's why I probably couldn't work in the NICU. I would get too emotional. And shout out to Trach Mama, Baby Lil. You're in our thoughts and prayers. All the caregivers, you worked and did as much as you can, and it's never easy. But a shout out to you guys. All right. So, happy May 4th. May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you. Thank you. We're excited for some happy moments now with Tara.
Yeah. And so we have Tara from episode 9, not Rise of the Skywalker, but actually Patient Experience. So Tara was with us before, and she went over Patient Experience, and she is probably our most downloaded episode. And so she's now come back for employee engagement. This is also someone who if I have any employee engagement questions, I reach out to first. And so this is who I would consider an expert. And so she was willing to come on the show and talk about patient engagement. And so Tara, thank you for coming on the show again, and thank you for being our chosen one. Not the Anakin, but our new chosen one.
All right. Thanks for having me
And-
back.
Yeah. And then so patient engagement, for those who don't know it because their hospital doesn't participate, can you briefly go over what patient engagement, not patient engagement, employee engagement is? Sorry, this Jedi juice
Sure.
is being late in the day.
All right. Yeah, of course. So employee engagement is really how we measure an employee's connection or sense of purpose in the workplace. So there's a lot of ways that we do that, whether we can measure that and that we work to improve our levels of employee engagement. But yeah, that's what it is. It's really the level of their connection to your mission, vision, values, to what they do. And then also, it's a little bit different than you might have also heard employee satisfaction. And that's a little bit different. So satisfaction is more about, you can be satisfied in your job, but not engaged. So it's really kind of like you're there, you're giving your time, but you're not really putting the energy or passion into it. So you can be satisfied, but not fully engaged. So that engagement is really where that passion lies and the innovation. And then those are, you're more of a high performer if you feel like you are fully engaged.
I mean, that's a heck of a breakdown, and it makes more sense now because you don't want the people that just clock in and then clock out. You want the staff that are going to come in and be engaged in the work that they do and try to do the best work they can, best patient care. So it makes sense. Would you run both initiatives, or is it one or the other?
You're really going to work towards the engagement, and I think that the satisfaction there's a lot of different, levels of engagement, or disengagement. So I think the satisfaction will fall in. I don't think you really want to do two separate goals there with that. But I think really, if you are working towards engaging your employees, you're going to be moving that group that is, only satisfied up to that engaged level. So that's really your goal. And then, you will move some that are maybe less engaged to that more satisfied level. So you're going to have different levels going on all the time, constantly working on that, but really just focusing on the engagement. And engagement really is about creating a long-term culture, like a culture change, where satisfaction, it's kind of more of those like action items along the way, or, you might have more employee focused events, or just little things, but really the engagement is focusing on the overall culture of your workplace. Let's say hospital, but it's all workplaces.
So if I was a new director to come into a department, what would I look for to know whether or not I need employee engagement? Like, do I need it now, or can I wait like 3 months? Like, what do I look for in that situation?
Well, there's different ways that we can, measure it with surveys and just see how, in a more, in that sense, we can look at it. You can also usually just tell by talking with people and getting a feel. If you're new to your department, it's good to just start talking with people and asking them questions and rounding with your employees. So I think that's number one. You can also do, some focus groups and see how your employees are feeling, especially if you are new, to ask the right questions, as far as, do you have the things that you need, your basic needs? Do you feel valued? And, do you feel connected to our mission here? So there's, things that you can start doing to get a sense of where people are at. And usually people are going to tell you, right? So if you have people are going to be pretty passionate about, oh, you're the new person. Oh, we've seen people come through here. They're going to tell you, one of the biggest things that I hear, especially if you're like a new leader coming in, you might hear some comments that kind of lead you to believe that maybe there's some people that are held more accountable than others, or some people kind of, to quote, get away with things, and I think that is a big dissatisfier and really drives down engagement when you don't feel like what you're doing, if you're doing everything's right and you are present, but you don't feel like that's being noticed, or you feel like, hey, well, even this guy who's a jerk to everybody, and really he gets away with it. He's still here. He never, he's still here doing the same things he's doing. So I think if you start asking the questions and giving people that time to really think and respond, you'll start. It's usually pretty obvious once people are allowed that chance to talk and given that space.
It makes sense, and I'm probably guilty of it. I just never thought of it. But I guess you do manage people at different base levels, right? So
Yes.
the 80/20 or 70/30 rule, the people at the bottom, you expect them to be at the bottom. And if they do any little thing to show improvement, you will show it. But then a high performer, if they fall a little bit, you want to punish them. And that's not the right way to go about it, I'm assuming, right?
Right. No, you definitely want to, put more of your time and energy into the folks that are the high performers, even the middle performers. So you're trying to move them up to be the more engaged, right? We always say, sometimes that smallest group of those actively disengaged people are, the most frustrating and where we end up spending a lot of our time. But, whether it's escalating things through HR or having difficult conversations with them, and it kind of leaves less time to actually celebrate the people that are doing it right most or all of the time. So yeah, it definitely breaks down into that high, middle, low performance group. But when you're really focusing on the engagement, there's a ton of studies out there that show, even with Gallup, at least a 20% increase in your profitability, and your other factors, as far as productivity. So when you can work to get people feeling passionate, it's going to improve a lot of different things.
That makes sense, because if we go back to the difference between employee engagement and employee satisfaction, uh, the person that came in, hid the entire shift and did nothing, probably leaves pretty happy, right? So it's just not an ideal situation. If you're looking for just satisfaction, you'd want that engagement. So that makes sense to me now. Um, so then, how much time do you have to spend on that 20% versus, the 40 in the middle, or the 60, or my math's off, but 20 on top?
With the levels of engagement, when you have someone, when it gets to a point where they're really in that bottom 20% and that actively disengaged, so that really means that at that point they're almost, or they are toxic. So, I think I said last time that you know who that person is in your department. If you're a manager, you can probably name them off, who the lower 20%, as far as low performers or actively disengaged, you know who they are. So you're probably already working with some of them in HR, or you're writing them up, or you're doing that. So I don't think you need to spend any more time than you already are as far as those steps, because when you're having those conversations with folks, called difficult conversations, and you're really asking them the right questions, like, are you sure that you want to be here? Or is there something going on that, is contributing to these behaviors that you've been exhibiting? Is there something I can help you with? You can always, start with offering help. Maybe in some cases, it can be a misunderstanding or a lack of education, or they feel uncomfortable, and they're kind of lashing out or being more defensive because of that. So asking those questions instead of going into it in a more defensive or, attacking way, or blaming. So, you can maybe change some of your language, even though you're already spending that amount of time with them. But if they aren't opening up at that point, or agreeing to really, okay, I'll be more attentive to, my behaviors, and, actively working on it, you don't really need to spend much more time than you're already spending, because that's not where you're going to get results. You're going to get better results if you focus on those middle performers, or people that are, they're not quite engaged, but they're kind of right in the middle, but they are generally positive. Again, giving their time. They're usually, they want to set a good example. They want to do the right thing. Moving those people and getting them to feel engaged, like that's where your time is going to be much better spent.
What does a middle performer look like?
The middle performers, they are, usually have good attendance, so they're not the ones that are calling off all the time. They are, they want to do a good job. They could just need more experience. Like, it might be like a lack of experience, or they just need a little more education to feel more comfortable in certain things. And, they might even be the ones that kind of bring things to your attention if there are issues, and they might be kind of right on the cusp, especially if they're saying things like, well, this is the 5th time that so-and-so has been late, and it's really affecting my job. So they'll still be coming to you with and wanting guidance and wanting help. They won't be to the point where they're like, oh, I'm not even going to bother. This is just the same things that happen all the time, and really being toxic quite yet. But yeah, they're still loyal. You might even think like, oh, they're happy. They might even say, I like my job. I really like it here. They could definitely, they're very positive. And so that's going to be most of your workforce. Actually, it's at least like about 55 or 60% of employees. That's kind of where they're at. And then, around 30% are fully engaged. And then you have that bottom 20% or so.
Yeah, the 20% are the ones that I nicknamed. Those are the group that cannot take care of me or my family or friends.
They're
that
on.
group is, yeah, that group, they stick out like a sore thumb. And then, I mean, how realistic is it to get everyone to that top? Because that top person is doing everything and then going above and beyond. Like, they're stocking the equipment rooms, they're just stocking supplies, they're just bouncing around. I mean, how realistic is it to get that middle to that top?
It definitely is realistic. It takes, a lot of work. It can take some time, because again, it is that making sure your culture is where it needs to be. But within your department, I know like if you're an executive, you're going to have a little bit harder time because you're really focusing on the whole hospital, and the culture for everybody, right? But within your department, you can kind of gauge and just start there and just worry about that first. But yeah, I think it's definitely realistic. You just have to go about it the right way in an organized fashion. You can't just kind of throw some things out there and hope they work. Or you can't just say, well, we're going to do more events or more this or that. Like things like events are great, or things for the employees, or, hey, let's do a free giveaway, right? Or make sure we have great swag. Those things are great, and those can definitely lead to satisfaction and help. But those aren't really, the main things are going to change a person from being satisfied to engaged.
Let me ask Matt something, because you ran a department. Would this have helped you back then? Because this is really educational for me.
It is. And what Tara's saying for me means a lot. Okay. So you have the great people over here. Awesome. And what do? We give them more work.
Right.
We try to praise them as much as we can, but we don't. Then we have this middle group. They can come to the good side or go to the dark side. Sorry, I trying to figure out the right side. I'm trying to figure out to figure out how to pull this in today. And then you have, and I always say there's people that are in the boat and they're actively drilling holes, and those people just need to be thrown over. But the problem is, and Tara, this is what I want to learn from you. I want to learn from Jonathan and everybody, all the barflies, is why do we spend so much time on those people that just need to be thrown off without spending time on the middle and trying to get them to the light side? Talk about that.
Right. Well, I think a lot of times you get sucked in with the HR process, and that can take a long time. And a lot of people with those low performers or actively disengaged folks, they slip under the radar for a while, or a lot goes on before it's even brought to your attention, right? And then once it's brought to your attention, then you are, as a leader, you might witness it, you might not. At what point do you start writing this person up? Because it's hard when it's these, what you would think on, or maybe a one-off, or these behaviors, but when they all add up to this toxic person. So maybe it's like, are you actually tracking every time that they are late? Are you making sure that every conversation you have with this employee is documented? Because a lot of times we're having these conversations and we don't document them. So by the time we actually want to, ship that person off to their next job, right? It's taken so long to just get enough of what it takes, especially now, to actually do that, to actually have a person let go because of their behavior, unless it's something massive that happens and it's something you can terminate right away. There's so many things, especially if you're at a union hospital, that you have to be documenting. So it is very difficult to get people out.
But Tara, being a jerk's not against the law, right?
Right.
So,
and
you're kind of an a-hole, and that's not against policy. So
well,
they're being toxic, but how do you deal with that?
You tie it back to your mission. So it's not illegal, right? It's not, there's not technically a policy against it, but most, if not all employees, when they are hired, are actually signing to agree to the hospital's mission, vision, and values, to an ethic, to a code of conduct. So they would be violating that. But most of the time they violated it so many times without it ever being documented that until, they have punch one of their coworkers, then it's at that point, it's tough. So you have to be, and it can be frustrating, very thorough as a leader. And again, you don't want to spend too much time on it, but if you're going to bother spending time on those individuals, have it be documented. Document everything, your emails. If you have a conversation with them, even if it's, passing in the hall, like, oh, hey, I heard that, you haven't been on time. Really need you to get here on time. And it's really affecting your coworkers and giving them extra work. So, just make sure you work on that. Even if it feels like an informal conversation, then when you get back to your desk, send them an email and say, oh, thanks for, talking with me today in the hallway. We talked about your attendance, and have a paper trail available, because if you don't have that, it's very hard, because you're going to be at a point where you got other team members coming to you and be like, we can't work with this person anymore. And then you look back and you don't have anything documented. Even if someone else comes up to you and says, so-and-so's doing this, start writing it down and try to spend that time, even having, even if it's it still needs to be private conversation with this person. But, if you're able to just pull them into your office for a few minutes and just touch on it, because that's bringing it to their attention more, is also something that's going to raise their awareness and raise that person's awareness of, oh, somebody's paying attention to my terrible attitude, right? Because a lot of times we're just rolling our eyes at them and we avoid them altogether. We don't want to confront them, right? As fellow employees, we don't want to have that that confrontation. So we just complain to each other about it. We don't actually ever document it or confront that person and say, hey, I'm going to need you to stop speaking to me this way, or to our patients that way. And just so much of it goes on without actually being documented.
That's important, especially for new leaders, is to understand that if you do have a problematic employee, it's not always, well, they didn't break any policies. We can also look at mission, vision, and values. And I think it's an often overlooked practice to hold everyone accountable to the mission, vision, and values. I think we just think it's just a sign on the wall and we ignore it, but it is important to the organization. And then as far as like disciplining the bottom 20%, because they probably are toxic, you can't publicly discipline someone, but you have to let the rest of the staff know, or they will find out somehow that there is a line. If you do cross it, you will get disciplined like this person did, right? But you can't publicly say it. You kind of have to hope that toxic person vents to the rest of the department and then they find out themselves. But
right.
I mean, that is a big hit to employee engagement when you think, why am I having to go above and beyond, or why am I having to do this when this person doesn't even meet the minimum and gets away with everything, and they're never disciplined. And
Right.
The last department you and I worked in together, that's kind of what that rule was, right? I would sit there and I'd listen to the rest of the staff, and they would point out the worst person in the department. And they said, all I have to do is a little bit better than them. And I won't,
Yeah.
and then I don't have to worry about it. Right. So
Right.
then if they get fired, then whoever that bottom person is, then I just got to do a little bit better than them. But from a manager or leader perspective, that's just terrible.
Right. And with those low performers, when you again are having those conversations, you want to be specific with them. So, instead of saying, I saw you be rude with that patient and that's not acceptable, really saying, how was that person rude? You want to make it very specific and saying, I heard your tone of voice when you're talking with that patient. Some of the things you said, such as this, was very rude. To be as specific, to name the behavior as specifically as you can. Because when we just say that you're being rude, sometimes it doesn't register with some people what exactly that is. And also, again, it doesn't bring that awareness that it needs to say, somebody heard you say this, not, or act this specific way, rather than someone just said you're rude today, to name that specific behavior. And then also let them know this behavior, hurts your coworkers because they have to take that extra work, or hurts our patients, hurts patient safety, has to do with that. Your patient is less likely to listen to you if they think you're being rude to them or when you speak to them that way. And then really tell them what change you're expecting of them. So in the future, you cannot speak that way, say those things to patients or in front of patients to your coworkers, right? Sometimes we have those conversations between peer to peer, but they're in front of a patient. Like I can't tell you, we get those a lot in patient experience, the comments that come through the survey. They say, all I could hear, your employees were fighting at the nurse's station, or your one employee came in and was talking to another and they were talking trash about another employee. And so it becomes problematic. I mean, the patients notice that and it bothers them, it stresses them out, right? So let them know what exact things you expect to change, and then get that verbal commitment from them and saying, can I expect that change from you? Have them say, when they say yes, because I mean, at that point, if they say no, you can definitely write them up. And then again, after that verbal commitment, you send a little thank you email for their conversation today about that. And thank you for your verbal commitment to not exhibiting these behaviors again. But it takes a lot of work to do that.
I like the thank you note. Typically I would send like a memo or something, just reminding them. But I do like the thank you piece to it, because at least it feels like you're working with them.
Right.
Right. But so I feel like we're in a situation right now, and you probably experienced it in your own hospital, where we're so short staffed that we're afraid that 20% is a large chunk of your department. If you get rid of them and are unable to replace them, is that better than keeping them and trying to manage them?
That is a big issue right now, because I hear that where I work, and I think most people can relate to that. And I think it really it depends on your situation. If there really is absolutely no other option, kind of weighing what are the issues here. Is it something that I feel can be improved? But otherwise, you have to think in terms of, I think we talked a little bit about it last time. Your one toxic employee can affect, up to 13 of your engaged employees, right? So your one toxic employee could be hurting your productivity more than if you were to potentially get rid of them and you're waiting to fill a replacement. You might be better off without them and having the morale boost, especially if it's someone people have been complaining to about for so long. The feeling of, from your other employees, as far as, oh, wow, they actually listened to me. They actually let that person go. Oh, wow, my they're seeing my contribution and my worth by not placing the worth on somebody that doesn't deserve it. And I think that can affect your department in better ways than if you do get rid of that person. And many times rather than just keeping them on for the sake of having a body there. And then just getting rid of them. And I know that sounds bad, not in that way, but just having them not work for you anymore, moving on to the next opportunity, and then working with your department and having that conversation. I know that we are down a person, and it might also be a good time to say, that a good reminder of our mission, vision, and values, and how important we take them here. And so, it's important to me that, as a leader, that you are feeling supported. So we are going to replace that position with someone that is, a team player and will be here to support you. It might take a little bit extra time to find the right person, but we want to make sure it's a good fit for our team. Someone's a good fit for our team, and explaining it in terms of how that loss benefits them. But most of the time, by that point, they are glad that that toxic person is gone.
Does a termination of someone in that 20% impact the other 20% that is still remaining? Does it make, is there any impact where they will pick it up because they know that termination is now a reality?
Yes. So that accountability factor, it can definitely with some be a wake up call, and be like, hey, I'm not going to get away with this anymore. That behavior is no longer accepted. And, I got to step it up. It absolutely can, that because you're instilling that accountability. And that's one of the, the main strategies in employee engagement is, fostering that culture of accountability. So, you have ownership over your role, you have ownership over making sure you're following our vision and values. And we're going to hold you accountable to that. So it absolutely
Yeah.
does have an effect with that lower 20%.
Which, in our case, in our last department, then yeah, it would, because everyone knows that they don't want to be the bottom. They just want to be above that. So you were raising the bar from the bottom up, and I guess in that situation.
Right.
So
And then you don't want to be discovered as the new bottom level, right? Like who's going to be the new bar, right? Is it going to be you? Like, because you don't want to be the bottom at that point, because you're the one
No,
that's going to
you
go
don't.
next, right?
Yeah. So it makes sense that they're going to want to pick it up. Our chat is on fire with quiet quitting and quiet firing. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, the quiet quitting, yeah, that is really kind of the checking out. So a lot of times it's when people that were once engaged even, or to that, even that middle part, those middle performers, really they're still going to go there. They're still going to collect their paycheck, but they've just learned that nothing's going to change. You're not going to hold anybody accountable. So again, it's that mentality of, I only have to do as much as, the last person that got fired. I just need to do a little more than that. And that's the quiet quitting. So they haven't completely quit. They're not gone. They're still physically there. And that is a lot of the mentality of a lot of those actively disengaged people.
Wait, Terry, can I
yeah.
jump in there?
Sure.
My understand of quiet quitting is I will do the job description that you were paying me to do, and I won't go above and beyond. And it's like divorcing like your ego, your sense of self from work. And is that quiet quitting, or is that a healthy work-life balance? Because, right, like overburdened, overworked, it's not, I think there's like both sides to the quiet quitting that
Right.
It's a fair question. And have you noticed at all with your middle employees who right, they're coming to work, they're doing their job. Have you noticed that also to be generational? Because I thought I had read some trends that said that this is either a post-pandemic trend or a generational one as well. And yeah, so curious what you think.
I think definitely the term quiet quitting picked up after the pandemic, right? I know I heard it more. And I think it really is, because you have to think in terms of engagement. Disengaged employees, so when they go from engaged employees are not necessarily, they might have a great work-life balance. It's just a matter of feeling that passion and that connection to your work. You might also be taking on additional things or additional work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your work-life balance is off. So in the disengaged, those middle performers, I do understand what you're saying. You don't want to, like, what's the point of putting that extra time and effort in and, busting it when I don't have to. So I think it is, it does have to do with your satisfaction, I think, more than your level of engagement. So I think that's it. So if you're unsatisfied, that's kind of more the quiet quitting. I think that's where the difference lies. Because not to mix up the whole, being engaged doesn't mean that you're working more than you should or more than you have to. Even you can be engaged and you can still be doing just your job description.
So Tara, real quick. So can I be engaged and not satisfied?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, engaged and not satisfied.
So I'm an engaged
Sorry,
employee.
you can be satisfied but not engaged. Yeah.
You can be satisfied but not engaged, but can
There you
you
go.
be engaged but not satisfied? So I'm engaged into my work, but I'm not satisfied where I'm at.
Yeah, I
I,
suppose that.
I could say that I was engaged and not satisfied in a few of my positions, right? Like I just,
Mhm.
this is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to do it because it's the right thing. But this place sucks, like
Yeah,
that's
but that
happened to me
means
many times.
you're not engaged at your workplace. That just means you're in the not engaged category.
But it
Because
shouldn't be, because
engaged,
what if I'm doing my job though? Like I'm doing my job and I'm
you're a middle
going,
performer. You're
No, but
doing your
he's
job.
passionately doing his job. He's
Yeah.
trying to change the
yeah,
culture.
yeah,
He
Right.
hates it, but he wants.
Right.
You're a middle performer. You're loyal. You get the job done. You're generally positive. Again, you care about being a good teammate, right? That's all middle performer. That's all actually falls also into the not engaged category. Don't get that confused with actively disengaged. Those are the toxic people.
Those
So-
are drilling holes in the boat.
Yeah.
100%. They are trying to F up the whole management. Like they're trying to like bring everybody down. But like I've been where Jonathan's been. I've been engaged. I want to do great work. I want to do this, but I don't like where I work. Like that
sounds like the army.
Yeah. Well, they haven't.
Tara,
Yeah. Mhm.
no, Tara, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Just thinking of the concept quiet quitting, right? So I guess you kind of just drop down one level, right? So if you're a high, you're going to go to the medium. If you're a medium, you're going to go to the low, right? But if you're a high who has a high likelihood of quiet quitting because you're already putting in so much, and if you don't feel like it's validated or warranted, then I could say, like, okay, well, then I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm just going to do my job. Right. So that would be quiet quitting, wouldn't it?
To a certain level, yeah. So you might not fall completely off the wagon. But we always say that, we think of like burnout. So, I've done so much. I can't, I've performed at this level. I don't want to do it anymore. I need a break. So what they've actually found is a lot of people don't completely burn out. You go through phases. So you might be at that high engagement phase and then feel, hey, I'm not being I don't feel recognized. I don't feel valued, and kind of fall back a little bit and kind of take a break. Right. But you're not completely burnt out. There's still time in a way that can be salvaged. Right. But then, so you can kind of go back and forth. That's what they kind of, especially with healthcare, that burnt out doesn't mean you're done or you're completely helpless at that point, or there's no hope for you. You can absolutely get burned out when you're engaged and then have to kind of cultivate that feeling of engagement again. Or, hopefully your workplace, or if you have a good leader, will see that and understand that and help you and have those conversations with you and ask, hey, what's going on? What can I do to get you feeling that way again? And I think that's like when you say that you feel engaged in your work, you're passionate about your work that you do, but you hate the place that you work. They do not have, so that place, if that's how the majority of the employees felt, they would have low employee engagement scores. You would not say that their employees are engaged if that's how they feel, because full engagement at your workplace means that you are passionate about the work that you do. You believe in the place that you work. You believe in their mission, vision, values. You feel valued. It's full. It's all the way. If you have that feeling of, I'm passionate about the work that I do. I'm a respiratory therapist and I love that work and I love the patients and I love that, but I could be happy, but I hate this place and I could be happy doing this anywhere. Then you're going to be in that middle column, right? Because you're not fully engaged at where you are currently are.
Okay. I
Does that make
mean,
sense?
yeah, it makes
Yeah.
it does make more sense. I'm learning a lot here actually.
Because if you're a
And it does make
leader,
more sense.
just think about if you're a leader and you're my employee, Jonathan, I want you fully engaged. I want you loving where you're working. I don't want you just loving the work, but hating your department and hating everything else. And you don't like your manager and you don't like the way the hospitals run and you don't believe in that they're following their mission, vision, and values. As a leader, to me, I would see that and I would say that you're not engaged. You aren't toxic, but you're not fully engaged.
Okay. I mean, so I kind of get all that now. It makes a little bit more sense. But how do you quantify this, right? So you already kind of touched on it with the questions. So what are like basic employee engagement questions that'll help you quantify where they're at on that spectrum?
So there's a lot of companies, especially hospitals, use the surveys, the employee engagement surveys. There's different types. So some are also using just employee satisfaction surveys. So they're measuring different things, but most places are now looking towards the full engagement level. So there's a wide range, a few vendors like Press Ganey has an employee engagement survey, Willis Towers Watson, and then Gallup is one of the top. If you've heard of Gallup, you hear, especially during election time, the Gallup polls, right? The Gallup has so much research. So they're one of the front runners, especially in employee engagement. So, they have a survey that only has 12 questions on it because they've done so much research on what questions correlate well, and really show strong, you can really tell where people fall, right? Because a lot of these surveys, you might have a survey, they're like, hey, go take your employee satisfaction survey, please. And you sit down, you're like, what the hell? This thing is 137 questions. And you're like, I don't have time for this. And you're like, I took this last year and I spent all this time and nothing happened. What happened with it? Right. So what's the point? Nothing changed. So some of those longer surveys can be more frustrating than the shorter ones. So I went through the Gallup Employee Engagement Champion program. So at Adventist Health, where I used to work, they used the Gallup survey. Subsequent places I've been, they've used different surveys. But out of the ones I've been exposed to, Gallup was definitely the most useful, the most clear. And it's only 12 questions. So you can really market it to your employees like, hey, it only takes like 15 minutes. It's just these 12 questions, rather than you need to like carve out an hour from your patients to sit down and do this. And they have a very clear outline, Gallup does, on what do you do with these results and action planning. Because if you are trying to get your feedback from employees, whether you have the surveys at your work or maybe you don't have surveys at your work, you can create your own departmental survey or focus groups, right, to get that feedback from people, if you don't have access to a survey. So, you can still ask the Q12. I have the list here in front of me if you'd like me to read that. Because really good
I'd like to hear
surveys,
some examples.
they address.
Hell yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. So
wait, I
right.
have to make this plug. We're going to bring
Sure.
a Gallup wizard on the show. She is like the lady of Gallup. I've even reached out to the CEO of Gallup. This is my one chance to plug him here because he added me on LinkedIn and he reads my fan messages to him of being like, come on our show, please, sir. Yeah. But he doesn't. So we're trying to get him to come on, John Clifton. This is for you, but we will have another Gallup person coming on in June. And then one of the questions that I think you're going to mention is, do you have a friend at work?
No, it's, do you have a best friend at work?
Best friend at work. Yep. Okay. So we are also going to dive into the power of friendship at work. That's going to be an episode in July. So I just want to say, like, this conversation is going to keep going, but I actually don't know all 12 questions. And I do have a follow-up question too, is like transparency. When you complete these surveys, like, do you reveal it to your coworkers, or excuse me, team members? I try to say not employee. I like to say like team member, but
we say like caregivers. Yeah.
Caregivers,
Absolutely. That's key. because many places you take the survey and again, you never hear about it again. So one of the big things that Gallup pushes, especially, and really Studer Group, they all do, is you need to review the results with your team. And when you're creating action plans or like, hey, what are we going to do with this information? You involve your team. You look at your scores together. You determine what are the things that we want to work on. As an engagement champion, they teach us to be coaches to the leaders. So we actually go and we coach the leaders on how to create their action plans. We'll actually attend some of their action planning meetings with their teams and help guide them on what questions should we choose to try to improve, because you're really going to focus on only one or two things, right? But you're going to look at your results, see where you scored high, where you scored low. You definitely want to review with the team and say, hey, this is what we did really well. We got high scores on this. I'm so glad that these things are going well, that you feel valued. But we scored lower on the, do you have everything you need at work, the tools and equipment that you need? So it's a conversation starter, if anything else. And you want them to feel involved and you want them to be able to get that feedback, because that's what's also cultivating engagement. Like, hey, they listened to me and here we are sitting together and my voice is being heard and we're deciding these things together, versus, oh, my manager's just looking at it off in their office and they're going to decide what we need, right? Versus what we decide what we need.
So Tara, real quick, because I've been on both sides of this. An employee engagement survey can be a weapon. Okay. And then you're talking about having a real conversation with people that you enjoy being around. There's a difference. And I'm sure you have departments that are like, hey, I want to work on our engagement. And you have departments like, I hate my manager. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to use this. Talk about surveys, what they mean, and how it makes it meaningful and not meaningful.
Again, I mean, the survey, it depends on what it's really looking at, if it's engagement or satisfaction. But yeah, a lot of these surveys lead to some difficult conversations, because if you do notice that one of your, scores is low in the management category, because some of the questions that have, I'll say one question on the Gallup survey is, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. So, if you're scoring low in that regard as a leader, it's going to be tough. And you are going to have the people, no matter what you score low on, sitting there in the meeting saying, this is stupid, nothing's going to come of this. And from there, trying to involve those people and asking them for solutions, and what they could, having them come up with the answers really and help guiding them toward that. Doesn't mean it's going to make them engaged all of a sudden, but it does at least acknowledge their feelings, and because chances are there's more than maybe one person that feels that way, and trying to understand where that anger is coming from them. So, I think it really is just going to be a lot of tough conversations in some regards, especially if it's a management issue, but you don't want to ignore that. And sometimes if we do see areas with very low manager scores, as the admin team and the coaches, however it's structured, where you are, we look at that and we see, oh, this department got really poor, scores about their manager. So that would actually warrant a conversation with that manager too, from their one up, yeah. Right? So I think that's important. And then maybe if needed, their one up might be present at their team meeting, or their action planning meeting. Or if they really feel like it's, an issue, then maybe they have a separate meeting where the one up meets with the team to get some feedback. And really it just can be a more delicate situation, but there are ways we can go about it, that if we are looking, especially if you're working with your one up when you do get the results, like you should,
sure.
You don't want it to feel like it's just you as a leader.
Yeah.
You can definitely seek out
So,
your
so Tara, like you're an expert in this, and I don't want to get down it. Oh, this is the bad stuff with it. Like, what's the secret sauce? What makes engagement happen? Like, I know I'm engaged, and I will tell you, I know what it does. Anna Hayes and Jonathan Butler, and all the people, all these barflies are on here. That's what gives me. That's what gets me engaged. That I have people I love being around. But what is your secret sauce to engagement?
I think it starts with that consistency in the follow-up, and really, making sure that you are meeting certain needs. So, with the Gallup survey, with pretty much every survey, they're kind of looking for certain things. Do you have your basic needs? Do you feel like you have, the basic things that help you do your job? Do you have opportunity for growth? So when people feel like they have opportunities to continue learning or growing, whether that's advancing or just learning within their role, or given that those educational opportunities. So that's, so that growth, and also that like teamwork, a sense of teamwork or a sense of belonging. So really kind of creating strategies around that. And then also the individual. So them feeling recognized or appreciated, and like they have a sense of worth. So that's really kind of where you start. And then you can start building, whether you want it to be employee recognition events. So sometimes you can start with, like where I work now, we have a culture and engagement steering committee. And then other committees that report up to that, like rewards and recognition or spirit squad or things like that. So for different things that are going on around the hospital, that help contribute towards satisfaction, or maybe that just general, that middle performer group, but might not move them up to that high performing group. But you really need to start with the sense of the basics. Do they have what they need? Because a lot of times people become disengaged or drop down from that fully engaged because, hey, I never have the equipment that I need. I'm always running around trying to get fix my computer. I don't have space. I don't have that. There are certain things that can really drag you down after a little while. And you have to acknowledge that. And a lot of times, even if you can't change it, if you just acknowledge it, that can be helpful. Stoplight reports are helpful when you are first starting out with your teams and action planning. So the stoplight reports, as far as having, I don't remember if we talked about this last time or not, but a column when you do get all this feedback from your staff, having the green column that says, these are things that we discussed that I'm able to work on right now. Here's the status of them. The yellow column, like, hey, this is some feedback we got. We're working on it. It's going to take a little more time. It's kind of on hold right now, and this is why. And then a red column that just says, we're not able to do these things right now. We can't buy, 15 more computers right now because of budget issues. But at least then it's visible to people. They know it was acknowledged, and they know that something was attempted to be done about it. And that can be very powerful. So I think just that feeling of not just them being accountable, but you as a leader are accountable. You are being accountable to this information that your team has given you. And even if you can't fix it, they know that you have tried and that you're supporting them, because that support is a big part, like right after their basic needs is your feeling supported as an individual and as a team. So just some things like that. I mean, some other,
Love it.
Yeah. As far as, little things you could do. So there's big things. You might need to revamp a process maybe. And you have to look at the bigger picture. It could be anything from, we don't like this person, we want them off of our team, right? To things like, my leader doesn't really know my name. I wish they really knew my name. That bums me out. I don't feel like like they like that, or that like they like me. I don't feel like they care about me. And it could be a process that's really driving down engagement. Like, you know what, we always have to do it this way, and it takes so much longer to do it that way. If only they listen to our ideas and we could change this process. You'd be shocked at how just, whether it's an easy fix or a more difficult fix, if you can adjust those little things along the way, this feedback that you're getting. And that's why those stoplight reports are so helpful, because it's all right in your face, and you can see, oh, wow, look at what's already been done, what we've already addressed. And then even if you see things in the yellow and red, it's like it hasn't been forgotten. That's something that I can go to my manager at any time and be like, hey, can you tell me more about what's going on with that? And that really fosters that communication, and them feeling like I'm part of this process. I have a voice. Because it's really like when you don't feel seen and you don't feel like you have a voice is when you just kind of slink away, right? And you're just doing the basic of what you need to do. So yeah, and I think it really, more recognition opportunities, really just getting people involved, even if it's something small. So even if you know someone that maybe isn't as vocal, having that one-on-one with them. The employee rounding is a huge part of fostering engagement. If you're not doing that, or you think it's not important, you're selling yourself short and all of your employees short. So that's like one of the first things with Gallup, with Studer Group, Press Ganey, is you got to be rounding on your employees, and you got to be doing it in a meaningful way. Just like we talked about patient rounding, you can't just be walking by, patting them on the back, like, hey, everything okay here? Great. All right. It has to be more meaningful. You have to be asking them on a consistent basis. So I know Studer's rule is if you have less than 40 employees, you're rounding on your employees once a month. If you have more than 40 employees, it's every quarter. And you are asking them right now, do you have the tools and equipment you need to do your job? What processes do you think can be improved? Right. And then how can I support you? So you're asking them very specific questions. It only really needs to be, 3 or 4 questions. But as long as they're meaningful. And I think a lot of leaders think, oh, I'll get to that later, or that's, maybe my employees feel like they're in trouble when I bring them in. They don't like the rounding. They don't like it. And they kind of use that perception as an excuse not to do it. But in reality, you have to give it time. You can't expect your employees to open up to you during rounding your first time or two. Some of them are more uncomfortable with that. But once they, again, have that consistency, and they know, they get, okay, this is my time. I know what this is. Maybe I have nothing to talk about, but when I do, I know I'm going to have this chance with my leader. So when I'm ready, when they are ready, not when you as a leader are ready, then they will open up to you and they will give you that feedback. And you might be shocked at when it actually comes. And when they know and build that trust with you and they have that time with you, they're also more willing to share with you if something is going on in their life that they might be bringing to work, right? And maybe you've noticed an attitude change. You're going to have built that relationship with them to be able to have those types of conversations, because when they can rely on that time with you, and they know it's coming, and they might not have anything to say one month, but the next month, they've been using that time in between. They say, I know I have this time with my leader coming up. I'm just going to jot it down. Oh, here's something else. Oh, I'm going to talk to them about this when my time comes up, right? And they know they can go to you in between, right? Because you've also fostered that connection with them. But if they're on the lookout, they know they're looking for, oh, is this a process or something that I could talk to the leader about changing? Oh yeah, they're going to know those keywords once you start asking them those same questions. And you're not just asking them, hey, how's it going? How's your day going? How's everything going? Like, that's not enough. You can't ask them how everything is going. It's not going to foster a conversation and a real meaningful answer from them. Because when someone asks you that, when someone asks me that, it feels kind of like a cop out, like you're kind of like, you come up with what you want to talk to me about, instead of giving them prompts and giving them that time to think about it. Because if you make it too vague, you're going to get a vague answer. And sometimes we as leaders, when we're like mentally exhausted, we feel like, oh, that's all I can give them right now. But when you become comfortable with employee rounding and you get used to those 3 or 4 questions, very specific questions, right? Then you too, it feels like less of a burden to you because it's something that you are more used to now. So I think it just that consistency and the sticking with it and not falling off because like, oh, well, they're just not talking to me. They're not talking to me yet. So I'm going to skip this month, or I'm not going to ask them. I'm just going to be, go up to them and tell them they're doing a good job. That's not, you should definitely keep telling them that they're doing a good job, but what specifically are they doing well? First of all, don't just tell them they're doing a good job. Say, hey, I really liked how you said, this nice thing to the patient. You went to your coworker. I saw how you just went up to your coworker and offered to help them. That was really great. So those types of things are great in between, but having those meaningful, deliberate conversations, because it's just like with patient experience. I tell everyone that I educate, when you're doing your rounding, your hourly rounding, right? You think, oh, it's so repetitive and the patients, they're going to get sick of me. And, I always say, if I ever get a complaint from a patient and they're saying those people rounded on me too much, they were too attentive, they asked me too many questions about this and that, then I will give them a gift certificate, that employee gift certificate, because
that's
that's a great problem to have, that they felt so attended to that it was like became annoying, right?
Would you like your pillow fluffed?
Yeah, it's like, no, you've asked me that 5 times, but it's good because they'll remember that.
Yeah, exactly right.
The same thing with your employees. If they come to that one-on-one with you and they're like, no, all my needs are met, and they're vocalizing these things to you. No, I have everything I need to do my job. And no, I feel like you support me really great. I think you're a really great manager. They're going to start vocalizing. They're going to know what you're going to ask, right? And they're going to start vocalizing it to you. And then that helps reinforce it in their brains too. Like, I do have what I need. I have a great manager. So it can work for you in that way too.
I do like that follow-up though, because I could easily say 100% of every hospital I've worked at, I've come across disgruntled employees who say, they'll complain to me and I'll say, hey, well, why don't you voice your concern to your leader? And they're like, I'm not going to do that because nothing ever happens of it, right? So that follow-up is very important. But what's also important is that they're going to be passive aggressive. They're not going to actively go to a leader, but if that leader comes to them, it's removed a barrier, right? So it's easier to voice. All I have to do now is tell you what is wrong, and you're already there. So I don't have to go look for you. I don't have to be shy about going into a strange person's office or whatever.
Right.
I think that's beneficial. And I do like the quarterly. I think that annual survey is a good icebreaker, but you don't want to wait a year in between asking, do you have everything you need to work, right? That's a very long time to go without things that you need. So
you have to think of the employee engagement or any employee survey as a tool, not a solution. So it is only a tool. It's not like you just do that and you have your answers and that's that. Let's see what happens next year. You got to think of it as a tool in order to build your solutions, right? So you have to be following up with it in between. It can be a dissatisfier and cause people to become more disengaged if you don't follow up and you're not touching base with them in between.
Yeah, that applies to anywhere, right? I mean, if your significant other tried on a bunch of outfits and asked you which one you liked and they never wore the one you liked, you'd be very upset, right? And the same applies at work. Why do you ask my opinion if you don't do anything about it? So I think that, it would work in the reverse. If I was bedside and someone was asking me, what do I need? And I tell them, and I never got it, and it was ignored.
Yeah.
I went from engaged to disgruntled very quickly.
Right.
So it makes sense.
Yeah. And you have to think of, they say feelings are facts. So with your employees, sometimes you think that if they feel a certain way that, well, they're just being sensitive, or that's just how they feel, that's not important. They should still be able to do their job. But when you don't really appreciate that feelings are facts, and really, 75% of what we do or our behavior is based on our emotions, is really, that's what's driving them. And then our rational brain takes up, 25, 30%. And so we have to account for those emotions and build those connections, because when you can really appreciate people's emotions and that side, you're going to get a lot more out of them. And really, that's where that engagement is really going to thrive, if you can appreciate that and not diminish someone's feelings, or diminish if someone's telling you, hey, this is bothering me, this is important to me. Just because it's not important to you, or you don't think it's a big deal, you still have to take it into account. When I'm doing performance improvement in projects for patient experience, a lot of times right now where I am now, we have about 20 going on. So I work with each leader, and they have a what's called a service ambassador. So it's like their representative, they're from their frontline staff. And they decide together on a project that they're going to pick, whether it's improving a certain patient experience score, then we build action plans around that, or improving their employee engagement score. So the first thing that they have to do when we do like a root cause analysis, the first thing I have them do is, that means you're going to go out and you're going to talk to as many people as you can. And you're going to ask them, why do you think so? If it's medication, your medication communication scores are low. You're going to ask, why do you think, if you're going up to a random person, our scores are low for explaining side effects to patients? You're going to get so many different answers that you might not have thought of. And then you're going to ask, what are your barriers to explaining the side effects to patients? You're going to get a whole bunch of different answers. And sometimes I hear the leader and that frontline staff person, when they say, yeah, but that's not true. Like, that's not a problem for me. That's not really a problem, when someone's given their feedback. And I have to say, just because it's not a problem for you, you cannot ignore that this is an issue that is a barrier for people. And if we don't address this issue, you're going to have the same problems over and over and over again, if you are going to ignore it just because you don't feel like it's an issue. So same thing with employee engagement. If people are telling you, even if you think like, well, why would that be a big deal? Why, if moving the water cooler from over there to there because it's in the way of that computer, like, why is that a big deal? I'm not even going to worry about that. I got bigger things to worry about, right? But you'd be shocked if you just took that moment and you say, okay, if that's important to you, that's within my control, and that's something that works, let's do it. And giving them feeling that they feel empowered and that they have some sort of control and that you're advocating for them. And even if it's not necessarily important to you, or you don't feel like it's that big of a deal, that you've taken it seriously, and that you are addressing it.
I agree. Go ahead, Matt.
JB, just real quick, I think that's an important thing that Anna just put in the comments is Ted Lasso matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he's my favorite.
So he
Absolutely.
he fixed the water pressure. So when I started at my last job before I came to Vapotherm, they're like, hey, we have a problem. We can never find a vital capacity. We can never find a right respirometer to do a vital capacity. And I'm like, well, you just threw me the biggest softball on the planet. I'm going to fix that thing no matter what. And that's what I did. Just like Ted Lasso, I was going to fix this one thing that they were upset about. I mean, physically upset about. And just, I'm going to fix that one thing no matter how easy it is. If I
Yeah,
do that, I immediately get credibility. Every leader that starts out in leadership should channel Ted Lasso. Every single one.
So for
A
absolutely.
right
those,
respirometer? Were you looking for a museum piece? Was that
Hey,
what?
hey, slow down, California. We're in Pennsylvania here. It's a little different. You just settle down.
Sorry, Anna, go ahead.
no, for those who aren't familiar with Ted Lasso, like the first episode, he takes over this team that's losing, and they keep losing, and they lose the game, and the he's asking everybody like, hey, like no suggestions too small. Let me know what you think. And in the end of the first episode, they turn on the shower and they're blasted in the face with the water pressure that he fixes. And they celebrate someone's birthday. And
Yeah.
yeah, again, like what would Ted Lasso do? Which is funny because we talked about that in the last episode as well, that we did with episode 9.
Yeah. And it's really, and we as leaders, we kind of can become a little disassociated a lot of times. So even I'll say with my executive team, and I don't know how much time we have left, but today we, I let them know it's May the 4th. Let's, if you guys dressed up in costume and we went out together and we usually could do some snack rounds with the staff every week. But I said, if you came with us for snack rounds, you were allowed yourself to be a little vulnerable and silly, and they saw you in a different light, because that can help them, the barriers go down, right? And they're able to feel that emotion, associate that happy, fun emotion with you rather than you're just the boss, right? That's going to go over. They're going to love it. And I got a lot of hesitancy from them at first, like, well, are you sure? I don't really think that they're going to be into that, because it wasn't important to them. Like, there's not a lot of nerds on that. There's only a couple of them are nerds, but they didn't get it. It wasn't important to them. And we're still kind of getting to this point where we're meeting more in person rather than teams. It's kind of like, we don't think it's that big of a deal if we're like out there and we're doing this. And I said, let's please just do it. So I ordered them all costumes. They did it. The best one was inflatable Jabba the Hutt. It's like an inflatable T-Rex. It's freaking amazing. And they did it. Today they got in their costumes and it was freaking amazing. We went out. We're like, it felt like they were celebrities, right? People were just flocking to them and saying, oh my God, I can't believe it's you, to our CNO or to people that they are CMO, especially because that you never see them in that light. And if you can kind of change people's perception of, of yourself even, or that you care and that you're willing to be vulnerable and you're willing to go out of your comfort zone or what might be necessarily important to you because it's important to them.
Yeah, Tara, my parents are teachers, and they have had students that are like at a pizza shop, and they're like, you're a real person? Like,
Yeah.
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But that's kind of an important thing, like to
Humanizes
show
you.
it humanizes you.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's about.
Hera, is that exhausting for you to always? All right, story time. So I, used to be in the army, and my commander and we decided to sneak into a couple of our station commanders' offices, and we were gonna do like the elf thing and decorate the offices with Christmas, like make it like elf when he goes at night. And the next day they were upset, like they were like, no, we don't like Christmas. And they took down the decorations, and we were like, this was our personal money and like our personal time. Like I actually think we woke up at like 5 a.m. to do it before anybody got in the office. And so it's hard to be the person who champions when someone's like, I don't want to do this. And of course we're like, okay, we'll take down all the tinsel. Sorry, we got glitter everywhere. But
Yeah.
it's really, really hard, and like it's thankless. And yeah, anyways, how do you maintain this energy and to be this champion of like positivity?
Well, it's funny because even I go through those phases of, burnout or like the cycle, right? It's not really a full burnout, but there's times also when I'm like, oh man, like what am I gonna do? Like, how do I convince them? Or all the time I hear from people, oh, well, nothing's going to change, nothing. And a lot of times it's like, I don't want to make another promise to them that if I can't personally make it happen, or I'm not personally responsible for it becoming a reality. And it is very exhausting. I think you have to go in to a lot of situations, especially for me with patient experience, with a lot of research and data behind it, even though it is emotionally driven. Like, it helps when you have that behind you, and really saying, it's going to take a lot of focused effort to get this done. We're going to have to try a lot of different things. It's not just one thing, it's a lot of things. So you got to be in that mindset, and you got to be ready to try things that you aren't used to trying. And if we aren't committed to doing those things, then your expectation has to be realistic. It's not going to be what you want. And getting your leaders or other people to verbally commit and say, okay, yes, we can, now they can mentally prepare for those changes. So I think it is exhausting. So you have to just kind of pick your battles, really. Some things you have to kind of just go for it, and then the results will speak for themselves. If you have that power to do that. But yeah, I think it's exhausting, but I think when you can go in and it helps. So like with these surveys, and you're trying to convince a leader, hey, try these things, it'll work. And then you can look at the surveys and you say, hey, this department has got really great scores. What are they doing right? So you're trying to go in with like best practices, right? And then it's like so obvious when you go over there and you see the teamwork that's going on there, and you see how the manager interacts. I can think of those people right now in my organization who I know have really spent time with those emotional connections, and they follow up and they round on their employees, and they're out there and they're coaching them. They're coaching their employees. They're not just sitting in their office. Because unless, if you put that in front of people and say, okay, have you actually done these things? And then how often do you do it? Consistently? Did you just try it once and say, nothing happened with it, throw it away? Then it becomes, you're able to track it a little better. And when we start kind of tracking things and really taking a look, that's why I like to use those performance improvement structure, and really getting people to write down what they've actually done. It kind of opens their eyes as to, oh, maybe this is why it didn't work, because we really didn't follow through with it.
Is that normal that like I usually see the survey for my department, and maybe I'll see like the organization as a whole, but I don't see by department? Like, is that normal, that transparency? And then actually we had someone put in the chat, has anyone ever used a PIP to correct behavior, and did it work?
For the surveys, we don't normally have access to like everyone else's results. But we do recognize, like if we're in a meeting, we definitely recognize, hey, here's
the best.
Yeah, here are some top performers. And then we have them even present like, hey, what are some of the things that you do for employee engagement? And that's something we're really focusing on now. And our survey just came back. We're doing that. And our CEO sent out an email to everyone and say, write back and say exactly what you're doing to engage your employees. And really, recognizing those people. And again, that helps reinforce the leader too, because if you're a leader and you feel like you're doing all this and no one paying attention, you can get disengaged too.
And then that second question is, has anyone ever used a performance improvement plan and to correct behavior, and did it really work? Did it really correct the behavior?
As far as an action plan from the survey, or actual like HR
person?
Oh, okay.
HR.
Has it ever worked? I'm sure some work. I think it depends on how deliberate or specific it is. Again, if you're just telling people about a generalized behavior, you're not giving them specifics on what exactly that behavior or those words were, or that body language. You rolled your eyes. You weren't rude. You rolled your eyes and you said these specific hurtful words. And you're tracking it that way. I think sometimes we're just too vague, and we're not consistent enough. And then that is where it's going to fail. And again, sometimes with those actively disengaged employees, it's outside of your control. There's things going on that cannot, outside of work, that they're bringing to work. And if they're not willing to share that, then we can't, there's only so much. Yes.
So Tara, we are overtime. We're
Yeah.
doing some awesome RT sidebar stuff. I'm going to go to Jeffrey Davis because Jeffrey Davis just took himself off mute, and I want to hear what he has to say.
Oh, no. I was just about to kind of tag on to what Anna was asking Tara about the action. Sometimes you can do it all right and it's still not going to work. But
Right.
There's two people playing ball here, and it takes, if the person isn't open to change and isn't willing to change and doesn't try, and I think of it in the simplest form. I feel sad to say this, but it's true. I've terminated an employee for attendance. I've terminated more than one employee over my 20 years of management for attendance. And that's all on the employee. I can sit down, I can put you on an action plan. I can say directly exactly what the problem is, and there's no beating around the bush with that one. It's very black and white, and yet still they end up losing the job. And in a case, in the very first time that I did that, so I learned this lesson as a new manager. After this happened, and there were other behavioral issues with this employee, other employees came to me and said, "It's about time.
Yeah.
I've been waiting to see that." So,
Yeah.
when we were talking about, do you share it? Do you talk about, obviously when you're correcting an employee's behavior, you're not sharing that with other employees. It's private. I think somebody put it in the chat. You praise publicly and you reprimand privately. And yes, absolutely. We all know that. But your actions speak very loudly to the whole staff. And yeah, sometimes it's frustrating because people wonder, is anything ever being done about it? And I keep saying to them, you can't share that. You have to hope that they believe that you are doing things the right way. And eventually when you terminate somebody, it's the light bulb goes on in their head and says, oh, okay, there is a process, and it's frustrating and it's slow as a manager. We all know that, and you think you can never get rid of that bad seed, right? That it's like they're never going to leave and you're never going to get rid of them. I work in a union environment. Jonathan, if you're in California, you probably do too, and you almost can never get rid of a union employee. But you know what? When it needs to happen, it can happen, and it does happen, and it union just keeps you on the right track, I think. Make sure you make sure you're doing it right when you're working with the union.
Your documentation is lawyer-like.
It is.
Very good.
It is.
It improved my documentation tenfold, easy.
Yeah. And to your point, you can talk with that employee, even if you're, again, a highly engaged leader and you are really tapping into that emotional side, and you even get it out of an employee that says, you know what, I've been late, or I had to call off all these days because, actually my daughter is sick at home, and that's something you've just learned, right? I'm a caregiver for someone at home. It's been really tough. Or I'm dealing with, my, depression or something that's really a real issue. Right. And, something that you care about and you want to be, sensitive to that. And if you can offer a solution, then great. Is, some people can say, well, if I adjusted your schedule, would that help? Maybe you can start a little later if that's something that's within your power and that's something that works for you. A lot of with shift employees, not so much, right?
Well, let me help you with the paperwork on it sounds like you might need an intermittent FMLA.
Right. We have employee EAP, the employee assistance program. Can I get you something with that? And even doing all those things, that person might be very grateful for all that you're doing. But if that behavior still continues, then that's a great example of you doing all you can, the employee willing to have that conversation with you, and you just still can't make it work. And then you just have to have that difficult decision of, unfortunately, we need someone that's going to be here at this time. And I understand your position, and I'm so sorry for what you're going through. And we want you to take advantage of all the things that we have here. But if that's still not working for you, then we have to take that step. So there's still that opportunity to be compassionate as a leader.
Of course, yeah.
And then you're still having to make those hard decisions.
Jeffrey, this is, thank you for jumping in. Like, great feedback. I'm looking at Aaron, I'm looking at James's, I'm looking at Anju. Any other thoughts with this? Like, this is a big deal topic. Being personal, being a human at work is kind of a big deal. And people want that at work. Is that horrible? So
it is a big deal when it comes down to a situation where the employee is, on a final written warning, they're about to be terminated, and then that they're the sole breadwinner for their family with children, right? So that it really stabs you right in the heart. And what do you do in that situation, right? So on one hand, the show must go on, the hospital has to operate, the patients need to get the best care. But on the other hand, if I terminate this person, they may be, not in this environment, right? Because you get a job in seconds, but in situations where you couldn't, what impact did you cause that family? And,
Mhm.
it is the fault of the employee, but as a leader, whew, that is a tough one.
I can speak to that. Because, and again, I'm going to go back to the real simple one that I shared, the getting to work on time. If it says that your shift starts at 7 a.m. and you constantly can't make it until 7:15, we've got a problem, because I need to hold you accountable for that. Otherwise, everybody else in the department is going to say, why am I there at 7, right? Or the attendance policy. I mean, 'cause again, those are the most straightforward ones. Or, like I said, I've had to terminate a handful of people in my career, and it eats me up every single time. But in the very end, I know that I've done everything that I can to try to help this person, to give this person as much opportunity to succeed as humanly possible. I mean, I don't terminate you because you called in sick once. Never have, never will. You know, the way our policy is written, I think it's very broad, and it's very open, and it gives for a lot of opportunity. And you never, just because you broke the policy one time doesn't mean that you get terminated, or 2 times, or even 3 times. You have to have a succession of events over a period of time. And I guess what I'm saying is, in the end, I've been able to sleep at night after I've terminated an employee, because I feel that I've done so much and I've made so much effort to help this employee, and I haven't seen any effort on their part whatsoever.
So Jeffrey, I think that's that's an important piece, is that you feel, importantly, that you've given the best that you can give. You've given them the best chance. You treat them like a human.
Of course.
And
we have to.
And to do that, and then the decision to still not follow the rules is on them. And that's fine. That's easy. But does it hurt you? Being
I mean, I guess a little bit of,
there you go.
Man, I mean, I have a family. I've had small children. I've known what it's been like to live we all live paycheck to paycheck to a certain extent.
Mhm.
But I know what it's been like. Can't wait till that paycheck to come. And and I know how hard it is to miss even one paycheck. and if I've had to suspend somebody before even terminating them, provide a suspension. I had this happen not that long ago where I was giving a second suspension and this person was going to lose an entire not receive a paycheck. They're going to be suspended for 2 weeks. And it was kind of our last thing before termination. And that's kind of where this person is sitting right now. It was hard. It was really hard for me to stick to my guns. I'll admit, when this employee came to me and tried to plead his case, please don't suspend me. How am I going to do, it was very, very, very hard for me to stick to my gun. But I felt an obligation to the employee as well as to all my other employees that I had to stick to it. At that point, I had to stick to it. And I'm hoping it knocks some sense into this person, to be honest with you, because I don't want to have to terminate this person or anybody.
So Jeffrey, does this come back full circle to Tara? Tara, at the very first 2 minutes of this conversation, talked about mission and vision. You signed on to the mission of this hospital. And you're just not doing it. So I don't even know where to go with this. Still connecting that mission and vision matters. And that's why we're here. We're here to take care of patients. So Tara, I might go back to you for this one. How do we continue to take care of patients with all of this engagement, all satisfaction? How do we continue to do this?
I think with employee engagement, it really translates directly to the patients. I mean, when you have engaged employees, it improves quality, patient safety, patient satisfaction, because when you have employees that feel engaged, they're willing to engage more with the patients. They're willing to be more open with them, form those relationships with the patients if they feel engaged. I think it again leads to lower turnover, so it helps with your ratios. There's so many things that directly relate to patient care and improving the quality. I mean, when your employees feel engaged and empowered, then they are providing better care to our patients, because they don't have to worry about everything else. They can worry more about just focus on the patients and just not be carrying around a chip on their shoulder about everything else. There's still going to be issues, but they feel like they're being addressed and they don't have to carry that with them. And so it relates directly to patient care. And I think it's just, as leaders, remembering that employees, and it's been said many times before, employees don't leave companies or jobs, they leave leaders, right? Because so many times, if you're not being that support that they need and providing that, again, you might love your job, Jonathan, love what you do, be passionate, but you can do that anywhere. You're going to leave, right? So you have to make it a priority, because it does directly relate to that patient care and the quality of the care that their patient's going to receive. I always say happy staff is happy patients, right? But you got to be fostering that all the time. You can't just throw a fun event at the employees and think that's going to be enough.
You read more literature on this topic than anyone I know. I mean, is there any studies out there that should show a relationship between employee engagement and quality indicators, outcomes and?
Absolutely. There's especially through Gallup. So if you get the Gallup person on here, they can speak to that. They've done so much research on that exact correlation. And the patient outcomes and the quality measures, and alongside the employee engagement scores, right? So when you have better engagement, you have better patient satisfaction, you have safer patients, safer, all your processes just are really operating at the highest level, because you have that culture of safety and that culture of respect and when you think about your mission, vision, values, it just sounds like something off the website. But when you really tie it, when you are recognizing your employees, like we'll even say like, hey, today you really showed respect, and that's one of our values. And this is what you did to show that. Here, you showed dignity, like you really spoke to that patient's family, and you really made sure that they still felt that dignity, even though their loved one, it could be very embarrassing for them or something that's very difficult for them. So tying it back to that. So they feel that connection. And it's something you have to constantly reinforce. So it's not just a one and done, it's constant reinforcement. But yeah, there's absolutely, you can just Google it. There's a ton of research out there. And that's really what helps too, when you are trying to reinforce the importance of employee engagement with your other leaders or with your one up, and saying, this is why I want to do this, because look at what we can get out of it, right? Some people are really motivated by those numbers. Again, straight out of Gallup, it improves profitability by 20%, and your productivity as well. So it's just, it matters. It makes a difference. And they've seen that in the research for sure.
I'm learning so much right now. This is like one of my favorite shows so far. And I'm thinking about it, right? So if I go into a department as a new leader, their quality indicators are bad. I almost feel like the best strategy in this situation would be to tackle employee engagement first and then performance improvement projects, right? Because performance improvement projects requires change. It requires the staff to go and do something that they're not used to. But if they're not engaged, you're sunk from the start, right? So it would probably be a better pathway to work on employee engagement and then start your performance improvement plans, because otherwise you're just not going to get off the ground with 20 to 40% of your staff just not engaged.
Yeah. And when you're action planning for your employee engagement, like if you do get your results or you've done some focus groups with your employees, if you don't have a survey, you'll see a lot of that action planning when you're talking with your employees. You're really it's going to stand out of how it affects your quality. Some of the processes that they bring up that need improvement, or that they think that might not need improvement, but they think of a better way that it can be improved or that can be more efficient. Or if you're asking them, why do you feel like this quality measure is low? And again, what solutions do you have that we could use to improve this, and involving them in that? You could absolutely just work those into your action planning for employee engagement, and involving them in the solution and asking for their feedback on why in your department those quality measures are struggling. Because again, we as leaders, we talk a lot in our meetings and our conference calls about what we think the problem is or what we assume the problem is. But when we actually go out and talk to a selection of the staff, you're going to get answers you never would have imagined, because they're out there and they're the ones having to do it every day. So getting that feedback is essential to your employee improvement or your employee engagement action plan and your performance improvement. So it's number one, and it's automatically helping to engage them.
If I was back in the hospital, I think I would do things differently now. I've learned a lot. Matt, Anna, want to recap what we've learned here? There's so much content.
Holy
Yeah,
shit.
yeah. Tara, you're awesome as always. Like, I love that we all learn together live, and it's such a safe place where we can all just be learning so much. My big takeaways from this, like I was thinking a lot about like what can I do at my level, and like of course like paper trails, it's always like a good reminder. But the things that really hit me was kind of what we talked about with the Maslow like hierarchy of needs. That people want that consistency and follow up and just make sure their basic needs are being met. And I interpreted that as like wow, the power of a compliment, like recognizing someone and an individual. And I can, like, anyone can do that, and you can do it in front of people. And like, it's such a good reminder to do that. You can do that on the podcast by completing that form in the show notes and give someone a shout out. I mean, it can be so simple like that. And I also thought, I love you said meaningful, deliberate convos or conversations. I wrote convos. And I love that, the power of questions and not being like, hey, how's your day? Being like, how do you feel this process is going and how can we improve it, versus being like, what's going on today? And validating their feedback once they give it to you and how important that circle is. And like, again, I can do that. Anyone at any level can. That doesn't require like a survey to do that. And so thank you so much. I mean, I wrote so many different notes, but I thought those two were some heavier hitters for me. Like engagement versus satisfaction. I had no idea that one. We never even talked about quiet quitting. Like there's so much.
So much to talk about on this episode. I want to thank Jeffrey, Anuja, and Aaron for staying on a little bit, talk about their experience. I loved it very, very much. To me, the biggest takeaway is you can be a leader, but be a human. Being a human matters. And that matters to me. And there's times in my career where I wasn't a human. I cared about this metric. I care about this, but I wasn't a human. And I really, that's why I got most out of it. Tara, you are an excellent guest. That's why we're having you on the second time for RT Sidebar. JB, as always, I want to say May the 4th has been fantastic. So Tara, what would you like to talk about? Please give us a plug for your awesome podcast that you have.
Yeah, it's She Nerds Out podcast. Yeah, we talk about a lot of all things nerdy. So if you'd love to give a shout out to our listeners that are listening and learning about employee engagement today. So thank you.
You are.
Well, what's good about that is so it's applicable to any business, so or any company. If they didn't work in a hospital, it still applies to them. So I think everyone got something out of this.
Yeah, and I think it applies again to your personal life. You know, make things that are important to the people that are important to you. Make those things important to you too, and show them that, and be amazed at the results.
Terry, you just made my day. Saying that is we care about people. Let's make that the priority. So caring about people, let's give a happy birthday to our fearless leader, Joe Army. You're a Taurus. I don't know what that means, but Anna told me to say that. But Joe, we appreciate you. You've been very good to us, always looking at caring for patients, putting patients first. Thank you so much. Anna?
And huge shout out to Shannon Grimes in the Nashville area and her son Carson. We appreciate you both, and Vanderbilt Children's.
And a shout out to Patrick Lovett on his promotion. Congratulations. I also want to wish Joe Army a happy birthday. You know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. I'm having the time of my life. So thank you for bringing me on.
And I want to give one final shout out to Jav. He's a warrant officer. I learned so much being his fire support officer. Thank you for showing me what engagement and satisfaction and friendship actually is. So that is it for today's sidebar. Next week, or in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about RT education, and it'll be a really fun topic. So please register for that with the link in the show notes. That's all the time we have for today. Vapotherm does not practice medicine or provide medical services or advice. Any clinical recommendations provided herein are solely those of the speaker. Practitioners should refer to the full indications for use and operating instructions of any products referenced before use. The team behind the sidebar are employees of Vapotherm, and our guest is not compensated.